You won't believe what happened when a woman called the cops on her new black neighbor, just for moving in. But when she found out who that woman really was, she froze like she'd seen a ghost. Let me tell you how this shocking story unfolded. My name's Sergeant Maya Collins, and after serving 12 years in the U.S. Army, I finally decided to settle down. I'd been stationed overseas for most of my career, and when I came home, all I wanted was peace, a quiet house, a fresh start, and neighbors who minded their own business. So when I bought a modest little house in a suburban neighborhood just outside Atlanta, I thought I'd found exactly that. The houses were neat, the lawns were tidy, and the streets were quiet. It looked like the perfect place to rest after years of service. What I didn't realize was that behind those smiling neighbors was a storm waiting to explode. The day I moved in, the sun was blazing, and I was unloading boxes from the moving truck. I waved at a few people who passed by, and most waved back, except for one woman. She stood at the end of her driveway, arms crossed, staring at me like I'd parked a tank on her lawn. She was in her late 50s, bleach blonde hair, pearl necklace, and that unmistakable HOA energy. I smiled and said, "Good morning. I'm Maya, just moving in next door." She didn't smile back. Instead, she said, "Are you sure you have the right address?" That caught me off guard. Yeah. 214 Westfield. Just closed on it last week. She frowned. Didn't think that house would sell so fast. Then she turned around and walked back into her house without another word. That was my introduction to Carol Whitman, the self-appointed queen of the block. The first week went by fine, mostly unpacking, painting, and fixing little things. But every time I went outside, I'd see Carol peeking through her blinds or pretending to check her mail while watching me. It was annoying, but I let it slide. Then one afternoon, I was washing my car in the driveway when a police cruiser rolled up slowly. 2 officers stepped out. "Ma'am," one of them said cautiously, "we got a report of suspicious activity at this address." I looked around, confused. Suspicious activity? I'm washing my car. The officer checked his notes. Caller said someone might be trespassing, possibly breaking into the property. I couldn't help but laugh. "You're looking at the homeowner. I just moved in last week." I went inside, grabbed my ID and my property documents, and came back out. But the moment I handed them over, Carol came marching across her lawn. "There," she said, pointing at me like I was a criminal. "That's her. She's been going in and out of that house all week." The officer sighed. "Ma'am, she's the homeowner. Everything checks out." Carol blinked. "That's impossible. The last owner told me the buyer was—" She stopped herself mid-sentence, realizing what she was about to say. The officer gave her a look. "Was what, ma'am?" Carol stammered. Nothing. Must have been a misunderstanding." I folded my arms and said calmly, "Yeah, misunderstanding. Next time, maybe try knocking instead of calling 911. She turned bright red and stormed off without another word. I wish I could say that was the end of it. But with people like Carol, it never is. Over the next few weeks, the petty harassment started. Anonymous complaints to the HOA about my noisy car. Notes on my door about improper yard decorations. Someone even reported me for parking incorrectly in my own driveway. It was exhausting. One day, I caught her snapping photos of my yard from across the street. I walked over and said, "Carol, is there a reason you're taking pictures of my house?" She flinched. "Just documenting code violations." "Violations?" I asked. "I've done nothing wrong." She huffed. "You've got military stickers on your car. Those aren't authorized by the HOA without approval." I just stared at her. "You're joking, right?" She crossed her arms. "Rules are rules." I couldn't help but laugh. "Lady, I've been following rules my entire adult life. Trust me, I know what a real one looks like." She turned and walked off, muttering under her breath. That's when I decided enough was enough. I started documenting everything. Photos, videos, timestamps, every note she left on my door. I even installed a security camera over my garage, just in case. And sure enough, it caught something shocking just a week later. One night around 11 p.m., I saw movement on my driveway. When I checked the footage the next morning, there was Carol, in her bathrobe, walking up my path with a flashlight, snapping pictures of my car and porch. That was trespassing. So I took the footage straight to the police. The next afternoon, an officer came to speak with her. I watched from my window as she tried to play innocent, smiling and pretending she was just walking her dog. The cop didn't buy it. He gave her a formal warning and told her if she set foot on my property again, she'd be cited for harassment. And that's when Carol snapped. The following weekend, she decided to make my life miserable one last time. It was Saturday morning. I was sitting on the porch, drinking coffee, when I saw 2 police cars pull up again. The officers stepped out looking serious. "Ma'am," one said, "we received a report of a stolen vehicle registered to this address." My eyes widened. "A what?" Before I could answer, Carol came power walking out of her house, phone in hand, recording. "That's the one," she yelled, pointing at my car. "It's stolen. She's impersonating a veteran too. She doesn't belong here." The officers looked confused. One turned to me and asked, "Ma'am, can you verify your identity and vehicle registration?" I calmly stood up, grabbed my purse, and handed over my driver's license, registration, and military ID. The moment I showed that ID, everything changed. The younger officer's eyes widened. "You're Sergeant Collins?" "Yes, sir," I said. U.S. Army, 12 years active duty. He looked at his partner. They both turned to Carol. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "this woman is an active duty veteran and the legal owner of this home and vehicle. There's no stolen property here." Carol's smug grin melted instantly. Her face went pale, and her phone started shaking in her hand. I didn't know," the officer cut her off. "Ma'am, filing false police reports is a criminal offense. You've wasted department resources, again." She tried to defend herself. "But she made me feel unsafe." The officer replied, "What exactly made you feel unsafe? Her skin color? Her flag on the porch? Because nothing else about her is a threat." I'll never forget the silence that followed. Carol didn't say another word. The officers gave her a warning and left her standing there, speechless, in her own embarrassment. After that, something changed in the neighborhood. People who'd quietly watched before started coming up to me, apologizing for not stepping in sooner. One older couple brought cookies and said, "We're so sorry you had to deal with that. She's been bullying people for years." Even the HOA president, a man named Richard, showed up at my door a few days later. He said, "We're holding an emergency meeting about Carol's behavior. It's not the first complaint we've received. Turns out, she'd harassed several other neighbors, just never someone who stood up to her." When the HOA reviewed my security footage, complaint records, and police reports, they voted unanimously to remove her from the board and fine her for harassment and false reporting. She tried to appeal, but no one backed her. A few weeks later, she quietly put her house up for sale. The neighborhood has been peaceful ever since. I still live in that same house, my flag flying proudly on the porch, the same one she once complained about. And sometimes, when I see a moving truck down the street, I make sure to go say hello to the new neighbors, with a smile. Because no one should ever feel unwelcome where they live. A few months later, I ran into one of the officers who'd responded that day. He recognized me instantly. He said, "Sergeant Collins, just wanted to say, you handled that with more composure than most people would have." I smiled. "That's the Army for you. We're trained to stay calm under fire." He laughed. "Well, you sure earned that peace and quiet. And you know what? He was right. Because after everything, I finally had it. Prejudice and ignorance can make people do foolish things, but truth and integrity always win in the end. And sometimes, all it takes to silence hate is the sight of a military ID.